So guys, welcome to the inaugural White Noise Painting Contest review. I'm really excited to be joined by Simon Sihook and Sam Benson. How are you guys?
Yeah, great, thanks. I'm really excited about this. The quality of the very first painting contest is really great. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. The quality, but also the number of entries for a brand new painting comp for I suppose still relatively new podcast as well is really awesome. So yeah, really good to see. So I guess today what we're aiming to do here is give good critical feedback to every entry, and we're aiming to kind of give this kind of feedback for any subsequent competitions as well. Maybe not every entry if we've got hundreds of them, but hopefully we'll be able to provide really good, useful feedback to everyone. And on that note, I guess I want to just raise the point that if your miniature's in here and we're giving feedback on that, then obviously we're going to target that figure for some feedback. But certainly it doesn't stop the feedback for other miniatures being just as useful for your painting as well. We're not going to go through everything that every figure could potentially benefit from. We're going to sort of pick one thing and talk about that. So, yeah, absolutely worth listening to each of the figures, regardless of your skill level and where you're at.
No, sounds good. So I guess with that in mind, boys, let's get rolling. So that the first entry we're going to review is Ben Hardy's Cronted, and pretty awesome looking sculpt and paint job to start with, boys. What do you think?
Yeah, I loved it. I love the organic tones and the transition on there's the organic armoured plates. It was a great miniature. What do you think, Sam?
Absolutely. Firstly, I think I like the figure, so that helps. The green, I really like the tones of the green. It's quite sort of militaristic, and the contrast in that's really nice as well. And I think the contrast overall for the figure is really good. Sort of nice punchy highlights and some nice deep shading as well. I think the green looks like it uses a bit of sort of brown or red in the shading, which is a really good idea as well. So that can sort of play on some of the colour theory aspects of painting. So that was really interesting and nice to see as well.
Looking at it, that transition from the dark green to the light green kind of, I've done something similar in my combined armies, that kind of organic green armour, and it's kind of, for me, I like that look. You don't know whether it's grown, whether it's wearing armour, or whether it's grown onto it or somehow evolved. It's really captured that really well.
Yeah, and then you've got the contrast of the reddy orange skin as well, and again the contrast just within that as well, where the shading's fairly deep and it's got nice sort of bright highlights as well, and I think that really brings something special to the piece.
Yeah.
So, boys, if you had to maybe throw some shade at it, what would be some constructive criticism you guys could provide Ben?
Do you want to start this one, Simon?
Yeah, it's hard because it's overall it's a really nice figure, but probably for me it's just that final highlights, those little highlights, just kind of, some of them are absolutely stunning, but there's a couple where they could be almost look like chip paint, but it's not chip paint, so it looks like it's weathered. So particularly on the plasma gun, there's a couple of points where transitions really nicely and there's an abrupt stop, and that's it. That's the only kind of thing that I could see on it.
Yeah, I'd say that's that finishing as well, and that kind of plays a little bit in some of the overbrush work as well. There's a small amount of orange from the skin on the left thigh plate, for instance, and it's just that final sort of clean, those final clean brush strokes that they just maybe could be tightened up a little bit.
No, so some great feedback there, boys. So awesome job, Ben. A really, really lovely model to start with. Let's move on to Clay Lundy's Jambazan HMG, boys. What did you think of this one?
Great militaristic tones to this one. It's picked a good colour palette. It kind of suits the miniature. It looked like it could be out of any kind of modern warfare kind of shoot 'em up kind of thing. Good choice of colours.
Yeah, definitely. I love the scheme. I think, as you say, it suits the figure really well. I think the paintwork is showing certainly some shades and some highlights and things like that. if I was going to pick one thing to sort of offer as advice for this one, it'd probably be to push the highlights further and shade deeper and sort of just push the contrast a little bit further. Just sort of
that's what I was going to say, as well as kind of some washes to get some shade into those areas and deepen those shadows and those final highlights to pick out the details and kind of push it, that contrast.
Yep, definitely.
No, great. So you go, Sam?
I was just going to say, obviously moving forward, probably look at some blending techniques and things like that, but certainly some really strong aspects to this figure as well.
No, awesome job, Clay. So, yeah, great seeing that entry. So, so the next entry is Gavin Bateman, who gave us a Hexa proxy for a Reverend Custodia hacker. So in regards to the actual miniature then, boys, what would be some of the feedback we could provide, Gavin?
Look, I think the figure looks really nicely painted. I think you've got some nice sort of smooth blending, particularly in some of the orange bits there are really nice in the transition. The black cloak thing that the Hex is sort of wearing is nice and brightly highlighted as well, which I appreciate. Throw over to Simon, mate.
Yeah, the other thing too is I've been kind of following Gavin's painting for a while now on the Facebook group, and what he does do is he's been pushing his painting each miniature, so each one is getting better and better, and it's showing. And I think what he's doing is he's looking at different aspects of miniature painting and kind of adding that to it. So I think Gavin's going to be someone to watch with regards to miniature painting down the track, because he is applying and pushing himself.
Yeah, definitely. I've had words with Gav myself and sort of mentioned that he does some commission painting from time to time as well, and I've sort of mentioned that he's too cheap these days. So getting why he's cheap, guys.
Yeah, I think it's Cuddly Bear Painting for those viewers out there interested to check his work out. So definitely do that. Any constructive criticism for Gav, boys? Yeah, so any areas to try and work on to improve?
So it's a transition from the black to the white. That black's always a really hard colour to paint, and it'd probably benefit from having a look at. You've done a tutorial, haven't you, Sam, on painting black?
Yeah, certainly have, mate. There's a video tutorial and a couple of PDF documents as well, I think, that cover that very topic. So, yeah, absolutely.
But that's my feedback is that transition, that blending from the black to the white. But again, I know Gav pushes himself with regards to his painting, so let's look for another black miniature he paints in the future and see how he's gone from there.
I think what we're seeing here is Gav pushing the highlight, and the blending is maybe not quite as smooth as we'd like to see, but it is really good to see that bright highlight on black, because it does make it look darker. So it actually
gives it latex, almost like a latex shiny PVC kind of look.
Exactly. The other thing I'd like to raise on this mini is it looks like particularly the black areas have almost a glossy coat to them, and the way the figure's lit, it's impacting our ability really to see some of that detail. So again, it's just the photography really is maybe letting the figure down a little bit.
So, boys, what would you actually recommend to improve that then, yeah? So you're just saying add a bit more light or a different background, Sam, for Gav?
What you want is probably I wouldn't go a pure black background like this for a start, because cameras can be tricky or finicky with pure black or pure white. So something in the mid grey is really good backgrounds. You can have various textures and things in there if you want to sort of play with that, but something that's sort of not too far black or white or a bright colour or anything like that's good as a background. If you're trying to take a photo of the figure and just show the figure, that is. And with the lighting, just something to diffuse the lighting, so a light tent with the lights not sort of right up against the material, so it's more diffuse lighting.
Okay, cool. So, no, great job, Gavin. Lovely model. Moving on to James Matthews Cronted with Timbot, guys. So James has been on the podcast before, and so shout out to him. What did you boys think of this entry?
I thought it was another great combined army mini. I love the particular of the transition of colour from that back vent, kind of that yellow through to purple. some interesting like glow effects on the weapon too. That's really achieved that quite well.
Yeah, and again, you can see there's a bit of play here with the yellow to purple and things like that. A little bit of play in colour theory and that sort of thing as well, which is always nice to see. Always makes a nice impact. But I think this is one of the potentially one of the best figures in the comp this time round. And honestly, I think the photo lets it down. And it's preventing us from seeing as much of the details I'd like to see.
So Sam, go into that in a little bit more detail. So obviously this photo's got kind of shot kind of in game. You've got backgrounds and grass around him and stuff like that. So yeah, you would try and minimise that and try and shoot more on just a one colour backdrop.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the backdrop. I think it's more to do with the photos. Quite small in comparison to, say, Gav's photo before. The smaller figure is actually larger on the screen. And it's just the quality of the number of pixels in that space. So the resolution is just lower as well. So it makes it difficult to see if there's, there's sections that maybe look grainy on this photo that might not be grainy in real life. And we can't really tell that because we're looking at it online. So being an online comp, we don't have all the information that I'd love to see.
No, for sure. Any other thoughts from yourself, Simon, before we move on?
There's possibly like some of the paint looks a little bit grainy. It could be just like the pigmentation in it, like particularly around the wrist of the left hand, like looking straight on. It's hard to tell whether that's just the photo and the online photo kind of playing tricks, or whether it's just some paint that needs to be kind of smoothed out a little bit.
Yeah, and it's a bit tricky to tell what that might be from as well. If we're looking to improve, if there is grainy paint there, it could be the paint's past its prime and needs to be replaced. It could be the primer coat underneath or the cleanup of the metal itself even that's causing that. So it's a bit hard for us to kind of comment on that much further, to be honest.
No, definitely. I mean, I've seen a lot of James's work in person, and I think he's won pretty much all of our painting contests over the last couple of tournaments. So he's certainly got a bit of a gift. But yeah, no, thanks guys. Some good feedback for him there. Yeah. Alrighty, so the next one we're going to move on to is James Stevenson's Denarvis Hacker. So quite a different model to the ones we've just been reviewing. Simon, why don't you start us off? What did you think of this work?
Yeah, it's quite a subdued colour palette, and that's not a bad thing. I quite like the darkness to it. It's hard to tell though because the photo hasn't. It's a little too dark. I don't know whether that's the photo that's causing that or the actual miniature. But I like the dark tones to it, and it's a really nice skin tone too.
Yeah, I'd count this as a moody piece. I think it's a good phrase for it. Yeah, Simon?
Yeah.
Yep. So I think I pretty much agree. I like that it's a dark piece, even though it's wearing white. That can be tricky to pull off. So obviously, when you're trying to paint white and sort of get that moody dark feel, it's tricky because white is a bright colour. So I can see there's some nice sort of mid or dark shades of grey in the white, which is giving it that contrast and that sort of shading. And I mean, some of that might be the lighting, but certainly some of it's definitely paintwork as well. So that's really nice to see. I think my comments to improve would be things like the leggings, where a lot of that feels under highlighted to me. Just sort of pushing highlights a little bit further. You can still achieve a dark figure with brighter highlights, and that tends to have the effect of even sort of making it feel deeper and darker as well. And it can just help with the reading of the figure. And by what I mean by that is that you can see what bit's what on the figure very easily.
Yeah, my thing was the white, and again, that's whether it's the photo or not. But I would have liked to see the white pushed a little bit brighter on the highlights.
Yep.
No, great. So some really good feedback there for James, guys. Moving on, this next one was one of my favourites from Joachim Forsberg. It was a Nauf, and we did have a couple of Naufs, but let's start with his. What did you boys think of this one?
I thought it was a lovely miniature. nice colours, nice subdued military colours. I was in two minds with regards to the cloak is beautifully blended and the shoulder pad too, but also I was in two minds. Would I leave it like this, or would I put some details on there, because it's like these big flat areas that kind of crying out for detail. I'm not sure about you, Sam. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the cloak is definitely an area where you might look at some details, whether that's painted detail on or just sort of pushing the contrast higher and sort of having those sort of folds a bit more a bit more kind of in your face. I think the contrast on the folds around sort of like the hood there that's down on the cloak is it looks pretty highly contrasting. So I don't know if that's it, or if it really just does call for a bit of freehand or something. So it'd be nice.
I have been there where I've painted something and got such a beautiful blend on it, and going, I can't bring myself to paint something over the top of it.
You don't want to ruin it after that, do you? I think that as you said, I think the tones, the colours used are really nice. I think that the blue on the inner cloak is beautiful.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that now. Just that kind of the deepness of some of the popping out of the hexes pulled that up beautifully.
It pops out on the figure, and it's just the exact right tone for that creamy armour as well. Again, sort of I guess playing on colour theory a little bit, whether that was intentional or a happy accident. But yeah, the shading on those hexes and the curves of the way the cloak curls around like that is just really beautiful as well. And I really was quite impressed by that work. And I guess just overall the contrast on the strapping and the buckles and things like that is really nice. It sort of pops. It shows a nice command of contrast there too.
Great. So, yes, an awesome effort, mate. Lovely entry. Moving on, we've got Justin Reagan now with an Arslan proxy. What do you boys think of this next entry?
I thought it was a great conversion. It's that figure just calls out for conversion. I've done the same thing or something similar with that miniature. It's such a great pose to be playing around with, and he's done a really nice job converting it. Nice colour scheme. The only thing that got me with the purple knees, my eyes kind of go down towards the purple knees. They just kind of don't fit with the rest of the colour scheme. I'm not sure about the fluff behind this particular character, but that was the only thing that popped out to me. When I paint a figure, I always start with the face, and that gives me an idea of how the expression, the mood, where the figure's looking at, kind of thing. And your eyes are drawn to the face of the miniature or the helmet of the miniature or something like that. The purple kind of brings my eyes down a bit.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I think if you want to put purple on a figure that's got the rest of the scheme of the black and the green and that sort of thing, then use more of it. Yeah, so make it so it's not just a spot point on two knees. Make it a central point to the theme. If his chest were purple as well, then it wouldn't detract so much, or not. I suppose distract is a better word.
Yeah.
The face, I think, is a real opportunity on any figure, and I think I don't know if the photograph is washing it out. Or if the contrast is not painted in as highly as I'd like. So I think the face is definitely an area where I'd push contrast and sort of try to draw the eye in there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The face, as I said, the face is the bit that kind of draws you in and kind of gives you can see the expression on that face. It'd be nice to see a little bit more contrast. And that's just
a bit more emphasis,
yeah.
Okay, great.
Definitely.
No, awesome effort there, Justin. A really nice conversion work. Moving on, boys. The next one we've got is from Lawrence Townsend, which is an intruder sniper. So I personally love this sculpt. What do you boys think of the paint job from Lawrence?
Nice OSL on this one. Nice glow effects, and I noticed it after looking at it a couple of times, is the glow that's coming from the piece on the base, and it's reflecting onto the grates on the base. I think that's a really cool effect.
I really like that too. That's awesome.
Oh, I missed that. Yeah, okay, that's really nice. I was going to mention the glow effect on the left arm, on the left thigh, where it's spilling out onto the thigh. I think that's just really beautifully placed and perfectly in proportion to the light source as well. So I thought that was really nice. But yeah, glow effects on this were definitely what I was picking out as being the real standout.
Yeah, and probably looking at it, I would push the highlights, particularly like on the legs. Just getting, because there's all that strapping on the legs, just to kind of push that to kind of emphasize the detail.
Yep. If the highlights aren't there on strapping on figures this size, you just lose them. You just don't get to see them. So absolutely agree with the sentiment of pushing those highlights, and that's going to be a fairly common theme tonight, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. So any other feedback there for Lawrence, guys? I'll take that as a no. All right, so moving on. The next one we've got is from Liam Tennant, who's a local guy from our meta here. He's submitted an Interventor. Lovely work from Liam. What did you boys think?
Yeah, we had nice glow effects again, and the face is quite expressive. Something that with the Infinity images is a lot of people don't appreciate until you actually got one in front of you with a paintbrush is how small these faces are, and kind of getting an expressive face. Got the eyes in there again. Got to be commended for that.
Absolutely, and I think I was going to raise the same point with the face. What colour are those eyes?
They're blue.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look really closely, you can see he's painted an iris as well as a pupil, which is a sort of crazy crap that I do, and I don't do it on every figure. I was going to mention that the glow effect's looking really nice. I think the amount of contrast and everything on the white chest plate and everything's looking really good too. It's sort of got that nice sort of pop, especially glow on white. That's really hard to pull off. I always think twice when I'm deciding to do that on a figure myself, because you're trying to make a light source on something that's already white, and good luck with that. So I think to pull that off is actually a really good effort as well. So in terms of the negative, I've got to say that some of the photos are probably detracting a little bit. So, most of the photos, you've got part of the figure in focus and part of it out. And when you're trying to take photos, especially for a competition, trying to put your figure forward, you need to be able to see the figure. So I feel like that kind of didn't help. Even that close-up shot of the face there with the visor, which is only a millimetre or two further out than the face, is out of focus. So I don't know if that was the camera struggling with all the white and the white background as well, or the settings on the camera just not having quite enough depth of field. But that's something I'd probably look at in terms of photography for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you with that. The other one was the black on the weapon. There's a shot where you can see the weapon pointed up, and kind of some of the details is kind of you can't see it as much as probably looking at pushing the highlights on the black. Again, I push the highlights.
I think especially with the contrast between the black webbing on the bodysuit itself, where that's really quite contrasting, and then the gun is much less so. I think that's especially because he's got that contrast elsewhere on the figure. It's a stark contrast again. The other thing I'd mention on the weapon is, don't be afraid to paint it more than one colour. The whole gun is black. And I get the military my gun doesn't glint thing, but Infinity figures actually tend to look better if you do some shiny bits on the gun. I don't know.
Some great that brings up like District 9 weapons, the orange and white and things like that. When you think about it as a weapon, choice of colour for a weapon, you go, that's hideous. But when you see the movie District 9 and you look at some of those designs and the colour choices, you go, that actually works.
Yeah. And some of these figures, I mean, some of the some of the combatants we're portraying with Infinity figures aren't really, military in terms of it's an army and you need to be able to hide. It's military in terms of, you've got your digital camos and things like that are helping you out. And it's a shock and awe as well. You want to be noticed maybe in some of these cases. So I think in the background is just about every Infinity troop have some form of sort of active camouflage type deal. Not just the TO and your actual camo figures. They're just ramping it up an extra level. Yeah, I thought I'd read somewhere that they're basically always in parade dress, but they can flick a switch and it goes into to active gear. I don't know. Is that? Am I making that up?
Sounds like a good piece of the fluff to me, sir.
It might be. It sounds impressive, so I'm going to go with it.
On that note, we'll move on to the next entry, which is from Mario Guardian, who entered a Bagmari. This was certainly one of my favourite boys. What do you think of Mario's work?
I loved it. I thought it was a beautiful piece of work. Nice contrast on the blue, beautiful blues, the greens. Yeah. Even I love the base too. I've kind of.
It's a very Simon base, mate.
It is. I was going to say it looks like it could have been one of mine, but yeah,
definitely. I've got to echo the thoughts there. I think is spinning around to the photo where it's from behind, looking at the highlights on that backpack. It's just gorgeous. Yeah. I think there's some really nice smooth transitions on this piece, and it's a really nice example of what Infinity figures can look like. Yeah. If I'm being picky, which I guess we have to when we need to be providing some constructive criticism for everyone. I'm looking at the top of the gun on the figure where he's facing you, and I'm seeing it. Basically, it doesn't follow that same sort of level of contrast that the rest of the figure has. And again, that issue with it's all black. So the whole gun's black, which it's not necessarily a problem, but I would prefer to see some different shades of black or some silver on there or something like that, yeah?
Yeah, that's the only thing I could pick up, really, to be honest. One of the feedbacks I've written down was I'd love to be able to hold this one in my hands and have a good look at it.
Yeah.
There's worse feedback out there to get, boys. So yeah, great job, Mario, with our entry. Moving on, Math. Sorry, you go, Sam.
So I got one. Yeah, I got one more thing I'd like to mention, and that's probably just looking at the red ports or lights on the backpack. I'm not sure if they are lights. Looking at this figure, so if OSL or source lighting is something that these pieces were trying to attempt, I think it's probably missed the mark slightly. So if I'm being ultra critical, I'd probably say if that is meant to be a light, then probably look into that as a technique as the next thing to sort of push. Yeah.
No, great. No, good point there, Sam. Anything else, boys, from Mario's before we move on?
No.
So the next entry is from Matthew Devonish, who's entered an At Atlanta. What do you boys think of this work?
Yeah, it's a nice, subtle kind of drab. I say the word drab, but I don't mean it in a negative way because it's a sniper figure. Nice drab, lot of colours. The greys in particular, particularly on that back, the skirt on the back and the back of the figure.
Yeah, the bluey grey tone is just really nice as well. I think it's I don't know, that I'm thinking Games Workshop here when I say shadow grey, but that kind of like nice tone as well. It works really well with the figure. And then the rest of the colours that have been chosen are all in that kind of, as you said, drab. That's a military term, so I'm going to use it. That drab tones, yeah. So it does look quite militaristic, despite it being, in that sort of that grey tone is maybe not a traditional military colour. It still pulls that off really well.
Yeah, the only thing I would probably say is the buffs. We've got a nice kind of highlight on the grey, but the buffs don't get the same highlight, and that'd be pushing that buff. The colour on the shoulders and the backpack and things like that.
Yeah, particularly I think the backpack looks quite flat. I think it's got some shading, but the highlights are lacking. Yeah, so I think if you're pushing into a light color, it can be really difficult to know, where do I highlight? It's already light, and what do I use to highlight? And I think that the trick there is to learn to become comfortable with pushing highlights to at least almost white, if not all the way to white, on most colors most of the time. And I feel like that's just something that comes with a bit more experience and sort of practice. And obviously, if you're pushing that high, you don't want a big thick paint line of pure white. Yeah, you want to be fairly subtle with it. So it's about kind of learning that contrast play on a figure as well.
No, so great job, Matthew. Lovely entry. Moving on to the next one, boys, we've got Max Watchter, who's entered an Interventor. So this is another one of these lovely sculpts. What did you boys think of Max's work?
I thought it was an interesting colour scheme. I really liked the contrast of the red hair, and she's done a really nice job on that red. That's I wouldn't mind getting that recipe to do a redhead.
Yeah, it's a nice tone for a redhead for sure. I am digging the green and the purple, so the glow green and the purple of the sort of, I guess, the main armour or the main cloth. I am enjoying the colour scheme there, so I think that's been picked out quite nicely. And the red, again, just stands out from the rest of it.
It was a bit, the photos aren't great photos, so my feedback was pushing the black. Particularly looking at the side, you can see like the belts and the pistol holster and things like that. But it could also be the photo. But I think that needs to be pushed a little bit higher.
I think I'm seeing a lot of interference from the photography as well. There, if you look at the right boot. At the top of the right boot, you can see it's really nice and bright, and it's actually quite a smooth transition down, and that's not light because it shows up in multiple angles. So that's paint work, and it looks really, really nice. I'm enjoying that quite a lot. The contrast is there, the transition's there. It's quite smooth. It's quite nice. But there's a trick to photography or taking photos of figures, and it's one that takes a bit of mucking around and learning. You can do it with a camera phone, but you need to have a nice light setup. And I can see, especially in the photo there where the figure's being held, it's obviously just being taken under a light. And I think that's probably playing on some of the highlights and things as well, where it almost looks like the purple is metallic, I want to say, in some of these photos. And I think that's probably the light rather than it actually being metallic.
Yeah, looking at that, yeah. And you can see the colours are richer in the one where the figure's being held. And I think what's happening is the light sources.
That's the background. I think that's the background, allowing the camera to figure out the colours probably more accurately. I think the black background is probably playing havoc with whatever device it was used on this. And again, it's that issue where the light's really bright from the top. It's really hot light. It needs to be more diffuse.
No, but some good points there, boys. And yeah, great job, Max, with your entry. Moving on to the next one, guys. We've got Mike Moran with a Jambazan Sniper. I do like this older sculpt. What do you boys think of the paint job on this one?
Yeah, I like the colour choice, the blacks and the kind of the tone, the tanny tones. Again, picked a nice kind of military kind of. The figure's quite a sinister looking figure, like looking down the barrel of a sniper rifle, and the colours that they've been chosen kind of match that.
Yeah, definitely. I've always enjoyed the figure. I'm not quite sure how good a pose that is to shoot from, but it's like that ninja that's standing on one foot. Yeah, I'm seeing green in those dark areas. So this is it's a dark green. I've got a particularly good monitor for colours, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm seeing a dark green. I'm seeing the tan and even a darker version of the tan as well. So
okay,
colour and that's like I said, yeah, it's a nice little scheme. I think the main take from this would be play with contrast more. So especially you've got the shades, you've got the dark, but push the highlights in there. Start bringing out some more of that figure. Some of the figure here is lost just because it's an area of dark. So, the front-on photo here, it can be a bit tricky to figure out where the leg is versus the arm and things like that, just because the highlights are not quite bright enough.
Yeah, I was going to say pushing the highlights. That will bring out those details and kind of that contrast and kind of pop the detail.
No, great. No, some good feedback there from Mike, boys. Moving on, Oren Dotan has entered a Black Friar, so a new sculpt for us, boys. What do you boys think of the paint job on this one?
I love the glow effect on the sword. Reminiscent of Star Wars kind of thing. Great effect, that blue on the cloak and the hood and the leg, etc. Yeah,
does look cool.
I was going to say the same thing about Star Wars. That looks like the glow of a lightsaber, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really, really nice work on that. I'd probably say the only thing with the glow is it looks like he's got two lights on his head, and that's just because the glow on those hot points are probably a little too hot to be that far away from the light source of the sword itself. So it's just, I guess, about trying to, it's really, really nice glow around there, but don't necessarily put a hot spot that bright unless it is a light source itself or it plays those tricks.
And my only feedback for this one is just playing around with the blending. Some nice colours, nice application of colours, and just kind of blending some of the blending will kind of just tighten it up a bit. Yeah,
especially on the white, and white can be really hard to blend because it's one of those more difficult colours in terms of trying to attain a solid coat. So, quite often people, I guess, rush it a little bit and try to get the effect as quickly as they could if they were painting, say, a brown or a blue or something like that, and white just doesn't coat that well. So I think it's a matter of probably more transition colours and trying to blend those through to get the nice smooth transition. I would say that this guy can definitely paint smooth transitions because the glow effect has it. Yeah. So it's obviously he's painting in those glow effects, the blue on the brown and that sort of thing, and that looks really smooth. So the skill level's definitely there.
Yeah.
No, that's great, boys.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go, Simon.
No, I was just going to say that it was just that final blend.
Yep.
Cool.
The only other thing I can think of is probably just with the gun looking a little bit maybe flat. So just especially in the back part of it where it's getting some of that glow hit it. Just I guess remember to touch up those final highlights. Still, even though it might have been the glow knocking that back, I'll probably go back over it and apply those final highlights again just to bring that back out.
So the next entry is our first tag, boys, and it's a Marut from Reed Bambridge. Bit of a different background for this one, eh? Yeah,
this is again another interesting dark tonally kind of body to it with the purple. But interesting. I like there's some a little bit of purple glow effect going, and I really like the blue glow effect on the base, kind of quite subtle.
Yep. I think the glow effect on this is the strongest element, really. It's especially if I look at the face, the glow from that eye on the lighter grey panel underneath is just really nice. I think it's been really, really well executed. Glow on the base, as you say, is really, really nice as well, Simon.
I would suggest, and I've said it a couple of times, and so have you, is to push the highlights, because that's going to pop out that detail. If you have a look at it, particularly like if you look at the rear of it and all the detail on the back of the legs and the back and its rear end and stuff, a lot of detail there that kind of pushing those highlights will kind of bring that out and give it that real kind of robotic look to it.
Yeah, I mean, dead ass, right? You could really do something with that. You could push that right up. I was going to mention the same thing. Phrasing, sorry. I was going to mention the same thing. So, especially I'm pointing out the bum because it's a nice big flat sort of surface with some detail, and I'm not seeing a highlight across those edges of those panels and things like that. I'm not seeing it's a perfect opportunity to have one of those area lights that I'm so fond of when I'm painting black and things like that. Yeah. I would probably advise this gets pushed down in contrast as well. So actually, or up in contrast, but down in the shadows, as well as up in the highlights. So I think it's missing a bit. It's I guess more in the mid tones at the moment, and it needs to push from the deep tones into the light tones.
Great. So awesome job there from Reed. Moving on, the next one's a bit of a sinister-looking paint job, from Robert Cantrell, and he's painted up an Umbra, guys. What do we think of this one?
I loved it. Dark, brooding, everything you want in a sinister alien overlord, so to speak. No, not really nice coloured, really nice colour tones. There's that, and the sword, that little bit of brightness to the sword kind of gives you wondering what it's made of and how bad it's going to be when it hits you.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking the same thoughts. So I especially enjoyed the dark tones, but the bright highlights. I think that only adds to it. I've mentioned that a few times on the cast before, and even today. Pushing the highlight in a dark overall figure, pushing that final highlight actually makes it look darker. It actually gives it more of that mood and that feel. And I think that's been really well executed on this figure as well. The blending on the sword's another highlight, I think, on this one. That's a really beautiful sort of purple all the way through to a sort of bluey white tone in the highlight. It's really, really nice to sort of play with those transitions of colour as well.
I haven't got a lot of feedback with the figure because I really like the figure. My feedback's in the base. You've got a really dark black figure and the base is also black. Maybe I really love that green glow at the front of that. That's really cool. But particularly if you look at it from the rear, it almost blends in with the figure.
Yeah, it's so the base, I think, is a good one to point out and talk about. You've got this sort of green glow at the front. It ends quite abruptly. I think if it's meant to be a glow, it needs to sort of feather off more and probably hit the figure a bit to sort of show that off, and that can be a really effective base in itself. But I think that would also help to bring the miniature out from the base. If you've got a dark figure and on a dark base, it's going to kind of feel like it blends into it a bit. So it feels a little bit like the base was an afterthought. The figure's really nice.
Great. So, impressive paint job there, Rob. Thanks for your entry. Moving on, boys. Next one's from Russell McGifford, and we've got another Intruder Sniper, but quite a different feel to this one, yeah?
Yeah, I thought it was a nice, simple colour scheme. Like it was a nice choice of colours. There was nothing that... There's a few different colours going on there, but they're not kind of clashing, so to speak. Mm. And the red, done a really nice job on blending the red, particularly on the helmet.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a nice sort of. I feel it looks militaristic, even though it's got red and white on it as well. Like it feels like that red is maybe more of a pastel red, I suppose, rather than being a bright shiny red like I often push mine to. So it's really nice in terms of just it's got that kind of military feel, even though it's got red on it. I think it's a really nice effect.
Yeah, it's it could almost be a bounty hunter in Star Wars, that kind of thing. You could kind of see that in the new Solo movie or something like that. Again, pushing the highlights just slightly, particularly on the gun, and also probably pushing the shadows too, to just get a bit of contrast, particularly like around the legs, kind of that kind of the legs quite. Because of the position of the figure, it's kind of sticking out. Yeah. Just to kind of give a bit of deep darkness, deep shadow contrast to it.
Yep. I think the same sort of feedback from me too. I think pushing some of those highlights a little bit further. I feel like the black paneling on the legs could have done with just a really light edge highlight to pop out some of those panels, and I feel that would make them look a bit sharper. The red, I guess it's a nice sort of pastel colour overall, but there's some edges of panels and things that would benefit from having an edge highlight as well. And red's one of those hard ones. It's hard to figure out what to highlight it with without it looking changing the colour overall too much as well.
And end up looking like it's pink.
pink, yeah, looking like it's pink or looking like it's orange, and if that's not the look you're going for, then that could be disappointing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. No. So great job there, Russell. Moving on, next entry, guys, is from Stefan Gamer, and he's painted up a Drakios. Now, just to clarify, this character has albedo, but doesn't really produce white noise or is impacted by it, so it won't be eligible for a prize this time around, Stefan, but we do really appreciate your entry still. What's some feedback, boys, on the actual paint job for Stefan, yeah?
There's some nice blends there. I really like how the face, you're drawn to the face, like particularly at the forehead, the nose, that kind of thing. That's the blending, bringing it up, so it's kind of the focal point of the miniature. The green's nicely blended as well. The only thing is the photos are a little bit blurry, so some of the detail it's hard to see.
Yeah, I'd love to see this figure closer. Yeah, so a bigger photo or in person would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it looks like he's got the bots there in the second photo as well, and I think there's some red sort of OSL on those, and there's some red ports in the guy's back and in his chest piece as well, and that looks quite nicely done as well. I think the colour choices of those is really good, really strong, and it's managed to do red on green without looking like a Christmas tree as well, which can be a bit of a trick. So yeah, no, I think overall the contrast is looking pretty good. I think the colour choices are nice. It looks like a nice piece. Just wish I could see it a bit more clearly, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of give some feedback because you can't tell whether it's highlighted or where it's a bad photo, like the photo's blurry.
Yeah, I think the fact that I can clearly see every part of the figure, even though the photo makes that quite a small figure on my screen, that does speak volumes for the highlighting being pretty good, because usually if it's a small photo, it just blends into a blob. So I think and that's partly to do with colour placement and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I think overall I quite like the effect. Yeah.
No, so great job there, Stefan, and lovely entry. So the next entry, boys, comes from Stephen Garcia, who's done a beautiful Coog Delegate. Now, we reached out to Steve and said, we're not really seeing the white noise in this entry, and he said the model is so beautiful, it is white noise. So what do you reckon? Should we accept or decline his argument there, guys?
Ooh.
I hear Stephen's not a very nice fella, so I don't know, mate.
So yeah, we made an executive decision. Stephen, unfortunately, won't be eligible for any prizes, but we did want to gush over his beautiful work. Simon, why don't you start us off? What were you think of his paint job?
I wrote wow and then wow again. It's such a nice figure. The only feedback I could possibly give this is how come I can't see it in front of me?
He's in Texas, mate.
Yeah. It's a beautiful miniature. It's
a long-ass flight. Look, I think he's done a great job, and I've been watching Stephen for a while now, so I've sort of I think the first contact that I had with Stephen was him probably contacting me, I think, asking for tips on how to improve and things like that, and sort of so I've sort of offered a bit of help, and I feel like I'm responsible for this figure.
So humble.
No, look, he's come a long way in a very short time, and I think Stephen's work's beautiful now, and certainly up there. Let's be polite and kind to me and say rivaling my work. Yeah.
So humble again.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess as with the other entries, boys,
I'm the expert on the show, right?
Talk to us about some of the things he's done well, I guess. Then again, any areas that people can, I guess, learn from this piece, or again, even any minor critiques. Yeah, as we've done with the other ones.
Yeah, so this figure's got quite a bit of detail sculpted into it. So I think is that a Camino? Is that how you pronounce that?
Komodo, isn't it?
Komodo.
Komodo sounds good to me.
Yeah, a Japanese thing. So I feel like the painting the flowers and that sort of thing on there is great, but they're part of the sculpt. Yeah. So the thing that stood out for me is that pink section in the red, that's all painted on. There's only those sort of purple flowers that are actually sculpted in, and then he's gone in there and he's added these little white flowers as well. So just to have that extra little level of detail was really nice. Bit of freehand on there to really jazz it up.
And he's got the detail on the sash at the back too, and you can actually see not just on the elements of that sash that's sticking out, but if you look closely, you can see that he's replicated the pattern on the inside of the sash as well, which kind of pretty mind blowing.
Yeah. It just adds that little bit extra, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think if I'm being, and you've got to be hypercritical in a figure like this if you want to be providing constructive criticism, right? If I'm being hypercritical, I'm going to say, there's some folds on the left arm of the cloak and on the right as well, actually, or the top there, that could benefit a highlight, just the final highlight, just to pull those folds out, so it doesn't look just like a smooth piece of cloth. And again, that's sort of really picky. And I'd probably say the same thing about the hair, especially with a purple head like that, purple hair. It feels like it's going to be really nicely looked after with that shampoo that makes you shiny, yeah? So I'd like to see that bright white highlight across where the hair folds. But like I said, it's a beautiful piece. I really like the pink. It makes me sound uber manly and all, but I think the tones in sections are beautiful. I think he's done a really nice job, and that goes to the sash as well. The sash has got that kind of nice soft pink colour. So it's really, really beautiful figure.
The other thing too is he's got a very traditional looking Japanese, like it could almost be historical contrast with this high tech.
The glowing briefcase.
Yeah, it's a really nice effect and kind of brings the two worlds of the JSA, like that traditional JSA samurai Bushido code, into the 21st century or whatever it is, 22nd century or the Infinity Universe. So, done a great job there.
Oh, so
absolutely.
Sorry, you go, Sam.
I was just going to say, and I think that's actually emphasised even more so by the sheer depth of the highlighting and shading on that case. So it sort of goes really bright into really dark. It's not just greys. There's some colour in there as well. So it's sort of he's gone through a sort of greeny, I want to say greeny grey, to get that sort of nice looking case there with the green lights on there as well. So I'm a big fan. I think it's a great figure.
So I think the rest of the entries will be happy that Stephen didn't follow the rules for this competition, but possibly slightly scared that he might the next time round. But no, well done, Steve. Beautiful work, yeah. Moving on, guys, we've got Zenon Berg with another Nauf. So this is the second Nauf we've had a look at. What do you guys think of Zenon's work?
I think he's done a great job on the camo. Camo's a really hard thing to do. Camo camo is designed to break up a shape, and painting it on a miniature is almost counterproductive in some regards, but I can understand why you would use camo on certain things. My suggestion would be is to kind of possibly use some washes or some something to create some shadow, particularly on the back of that camo cloak, like in the depths around the hood, in the folds, that kind of thing, just to kind of emphasize the material part of it. Because he's done a great job with the camo. He's broken up the shape, but you've also lost the shape in regards to the figure.
Absolutely, and that can be really tricky too. Yeah, so he's got a dark blue, he's got lighter blue, and he's got white in that camo. So how do you shade that after the camo's gone down? And I'd actually say that's something I'd usually try to attempt prior to the camo. So highlight the cloak, shade the cloak, get a beautiful flat colour cloak, maybe that's one of the colours that you're using on the camo, and then apply the camo pattern using thinner paint so that some of the shading and highlighting underneath shows through it. I think that works probably overall a little bit better, because you might want to use different colours for the shades of the various colours on the pattern, yeah?
Trick I did with my scouts that I did for Golden Demon, they had camo cloaks, and what I did in the shadows is I used a black pastel powder, and then on the highlights I used a white pastel, and that It's
not painting.
It's just a trick, isn't it?
That's not paint. It's not paint, mate. You go on a Slayer sword for that. I call shenanigans. And that means we're both the same.
You can come and take it from my cold dead hands.
All right, boys, back on now.
But what I found is with the pastels, it kind of gives that the dark adds to the shadow and the white draws it out. I just found that was just a bit of a trick I did with regards to, because otherwise the alternative is in this one is looking at every single little dot of different color and picking a different one and building it up that way, and that's a lot of work.
Absolutely. So with your pigments or your pastels as well, just remember to use a dry pastel if you're using artist's pastels as opposed to, say, a MIG pigment or something like that. Then a dry pastel is the one you want. You don't want to have a binding agent in there getting in the way either. So one of those pastels.
The ones you get from the art shop that are it's like a chalk, and just use a scalpel to create a powder, and But
I've used it plenty. Sorry.
Yeah. And it is something you're going to need to fix, because it will come off on your hands, particularly those highlights. So dull coat or a I think you can get a pastel fixer.
And you'll find it can be tricky to keep it where you want it as you're applying it too. If you have a little bit too much on the brush or something like that, it can end up falling on lower parts of the model and things like that. So I think it's a skill. And my joking before, mate, it was in jest, mate.
No. Well, I wasn't. You will have to take it from my cold dead hands.
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
All right. So moving on then from Zenon's job, and great job, mate, on Nauf. We've got Mark Chi with another Umbra. What do you guys think of this? So this is our second last model to review. A different colour scheme on this one, yeah?
I just love the glow of this one. This is kind of the last one we saw was dark and brooding. This is still evil looking. This looks like something from the Marvel Universe kind of thing. It looks like, it should be accompanying Thanos kind of thing. But I love the kind of the glow. It's kind of a really alien kind of material glow to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm actually a big fan of the dual light source. So he's got the red coming off his sword, and he's also got sort of a bluey green colour or yellowy colour sort of coming from some other source that's off from the figure as well. So I'm enjoying the fact that there's this sort of dual light source, and there's, I don't know, the dark side, the light side, maybe, I don't know, something like that. I think it adds a really striking mood, doesn't it?
Yeah. And my only feedback would be to, possibly looking at some of the blends, particularly when you look on the right thigh with regards to that glow effect, just to tidy those up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was probably applied with a paint that was drier than it could or maybe should have been. So I think when I apply a glow effect where it's glowing off onto another piece of the figure, I'm usually trying to sort of apply thin glazes and add a couple of layers to get the opacity I'm after, because that'll tend to show off some of the colour underneath as well. I think part of my problem, or part of my issue with that same section, is that the purple's kind of being lost under it.
Interesting, because I approach that glow effect slightly differently. I'll get the base colour, so I'll use the purple, and I'll gradually add the red or the yellow to it to build it up to that highlight. That's just a different way of doing it. That's how I do it. But
yeah. Yours sounds like it might take more layers and more time and more care, whereas I'm a bit of a hack. I reckon that's probably it there.
Cool. Now, so good job there, Mark. And last but not least is Frederick Lee with a Maverick. I remember Fred because I think at my first CanCon, his army won Best Painted, Sam. So, so a nice entry here to finish off. What did you boys think of this bike model?
I thought it was fantastic. It's got a really military feel to it. The colours, everything. This looks like it would be riding across an Afghan desert, on manoeuvres almost. My suggestion, though, is particularly with these kind of models, is to add a bit of weathering to it. bit of dust and dirt and stuff that's kind of kicked up from the wheels and on the lower portion of it. That's what I would have liked to have seen. But I like the colour choices. Lots of different greens and browns, but they all kind of slightly different tones, which all kind of fit in.
Yeah, definitely the tonal choices on this figure are really nice. I think I'm actually quite enjoying the non-metallic underbody of the bike as well. In that contrast, sort of it looks kind of stands out, looks different because of the colours that have been chosen.
Yeah,
I agree. I think even just taking a bit of a brown weathering powder, like or an artist pastel, would really benefit the figure, just to sort of muddy up the soles of the boots, maybe throw some dust on the lowest sort of sections of the bike would be really really nice, without impacting the shiny bits too much. Yeah. The only other thing I want to sort of raise is just he's got the painted on scratches and things, and I think that's as far as the weathering has gone with the boxes on the back of the bike and that sort of thing. It would be cool to have some weathering because it's got such I agree with you there, Simon, in that the piece feels like almost like a piece out of history. Yeah. And the other thing would be just tighten things up a little bit, and get those final highlights just a little bit sort of tighter and maybe a little bit brighter. And I think the star on the left-hand side of the bike, just kind of doing freehand like that's great. It's really cool, but just I guess try to keep it tighter. And you can actually cut that back in with the green to tighten up the edges and sort of bring the sharp points back to the star. So yeah, really really good attempt, mate. Really nice piece. And the gun's beautiful. The non-metallic on the bike's beautiful. The colour choices are great. I think I'm really a fan of the brown sections as well on this one.
No, cool. So look, a really awesome model to finish us off there. So look, I did want to thank you both, Sam and Simon, for your time and obviously going through these entries. Please hear, guys, our heart was obviously to try and provide, some really good constructive criticism for you guys to continue to improve your painting game, and we hope we've done that. Boys, do you have any other things you want to leave the viewers with before we finish up?
I'd just like to say the bar's been set quite high, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes up in the next comp.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd have to mirror that as well. It's a great range of miniatures in front of us tonight, and it's going to be hard when the coming discussion that we have to have about picking a favourite. Yeah, so great work, everyone, and thanks for absolutely everyone who entered. It's been a really good showing for the inaugural comp. It's great to see so many people who listen to the show are keen to push their painting and try out new things.
Definitely. So we'll finish up there. For viewers of this video cast, if you did want to hear the final winners and the prizes, that'll be on a White Noise podcast episode, which you're certainly welcome to have a listen to. But great job. Certainly we'd love feedback. We'd like to hear from the viewers and listeners if this is something that you'd like us to do again in future. So yeah, please let us know, guys, and let us know if you found it a bit too long or a bit too short, or just any ways we can tighten up what we're doing as well. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, that's been White Noise.